As the Book of Boba Fett has shown, the Tusken Raiders were not just savage brutes. Although territorial, they also had a rich culture, with much of their violence being a response to the encroachment of their ancestral land. As I've mentioned a few times over on my Shorts channel, the dark history of the Tuskens and the Jawas is steeped in violence, exploitation, and tragedy. In fact, if things had gone slightly differently, the Tuskens and Jawas may have been one of, if not the dominant species in the Star Wars galaxy. Today, we will be exploring the dark and violent history of Tatooine, from the age of the Infinite Empire to the Skywalker era. And if you like these longer episodes here on VF2, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and watch until the end for the algorithm, so I know to keep making these more in-depth videos. To understand how the Tuskens and Jawas got to where they were during the Imperial era, we must first understand where they came from. Their distant past is highly fragmented, steeped in mystery and mythology as many oral histories are. However, as we shall see, this history, known in canon as the Legend of Lehon, is certainly worth remembering. Many tens of thousands of years ago, the Sand People and Jawas did not yet exist. Their ancient ancestors were known as the Kamumga, a bipedal species of great intelligence. Darth Revan postulated that the Tuskens and humanity could be distantly related due to their resemblance of one another. Perhaps the Kamumga were the descendants of the humans who left Coruscant on sleeper ships tens of thousands of years before the Clone Wars, much like other near-human species such as the Cheers. Or perhaps they were brought to Tatooine by the Celestials or their client races. Or maybe they evolved on this Outer Rim planet naturally, and their resemblance is a mere coincidence. At this time, Tatooine was one of the most diverse and lush planets in the whole galaxy. Just like their Tusken descendants, the Kamumga were deeply connected to nature and the jungles they resided in, forming shamanic tribes across the planet. However, the Kamumga eventually industrialized, creating great cities upon their world and eventually discovering space travel. Their elders warned that this march towards ever more advanced technology would bring nothing but the destruction of their beautiful world and the end of the Kamumga people. However, the Kamumga were enthralled by their new technology, seeing themselves as the masters of nature and believing that their destiny resided among the stars. Sadly, they were very wrong. The Kamumga became completely dependent on their machinery, using it to expand outward onto many worlds in the Outer Rim. Ancient carvings have been found on Corellia and even Coruscant, suggesting that the Kamumga explored much of the galaxy. This exploration and colonization caught the attention of the dominant force in the galaxy, the brutal Rakatan Infinite Empire. Using their advanced force-based technology, the Rakata drove them back to Tatooine, enslaving them and exploiting them for resources. However, the Kamumga rose up against the Rakata, initiating a brutal conflict. The Sand People claim they drove the Rakata from their world, but others such as HK-47 believe this is unlikely. What is known is that the Rakata glassed the surface of Tatooine, destroying the Kamumga's cities and annihilating the planet's jungles. However, the Kamumga had anticipated this genocidal act and had hid deep underground within caves, saving them from the Rakata's wrath. Over time, the winds broke down the rubble into sand, creating the vast deserts Tatooine is known for. This marked the beginning of a period now known to the Tusken Raiders as the Long Walk. Due to the harsh conditions of their new world and many thousands of years spent in caves, the Kamumga split into two separate species, the tall Gorfas and the smaller Jawas. Both species were primitive, superstitious, and had long forgotten how to use their ancient technology. The Gorfas saw technology as the reason for their fall, believing that if the Kamumga had simply stayed one with nature, Tatooine would still be a lush jungle planet. The two species soon worked out ways to deal with the intense desert heat. The Tuskens bound themselves in rags to prevent moisture from escaping, while the Jawas wore hoods to dissipate the heat away from their bodies. Competition over resources was fierce, and for several thousand years the Jawas were hunted down and enslaved by the larger Gorfas. Although they were primitive, the Gorfas were not as barbaric as their later descendants, the Sand People. For much of this time, the Gorfas were settled around some form of water source, possibly leftover Kamumga technology. Although they refused to develop machinery, they still used written language in the form of hieroglyphs. This city represented hope for the Gorfas, and it looked as though they may be able to bring themselves back from the brink of destruction at the hands of the Rakata. However, all this would change in 5000 BBY. Human settlers from the Republic had begun exploring the Outer Rim, seeing it as a perfect place to conduct mining operations without the need to abide to the pesky regulations of the Senate. Scans of Tatooine showed that it was indeed rich in exotic metals, causing many human settlers and mining corporations to flock to the planet. The Gorfas hated the new human settlers. They reminded them of their technology-loving ancestors who had doomed their planet, refusing to cooperate with the Offworlders. However, the Jawas saw these settlers as an opportunity to trade and gain technology that would help them survive in the harsh deserts. The settlers began looking for ways of expanding their operation, and so began meddling with the Gorfas' water supply. Regardless of whether this was on purpose or was an accident, this led to the wells of the Gorfas drying up, leading to the deaths of many. Those who survived were forced back into the desert, becoming the aggressive and violent Sand People of the Skywalker era. After sustained attacks by the Sand People and the revelation that Tatooine's metal corroded incredibly quickly, the miners left, leaving behind giant sandcrawlers that were quickly claimed by the Jawas. For the next few thousand years, Tatooine was resettled and abandoned several times. Each time, the Sand People would take up arms against the invaders, while the Jawas would use the opportunity to trade with them. At some point during this period, groups of Jawas began emigrating to other desert planets. This started a new and less depressing age for the Jawas, who used their skills at stealing, smuggling, and bartering to become infamous traders. Eventually, the cycle of settlement and abandonment of Tatooine was broken, with the arrival of a settler ship from Bestine IV, who founded the first major permanent settlement on the planet that wasn't exclusively used for mining or criminal activities. They built the city of Bestine in 95 BBY, before establishing Fort Tusken in the relatively cooler northern part of the planet. However, Fort Tusken was sieged by the Sand People, leading to its desertion and earning the Sand People the nickname the Tusken Raiders. This also began a series of tit-for-tat skirmishes, kidnappings, and killings between the settled Offworlders and the Tuskens that still continue during the New Republic era. The Tusken Raiders and Jawas have a complex and tragic history, one marred by the effects of corporate exploitation, environmental catastrophe, and genocidal imperialism. However, the Tuskens and Jawas were not the only species to be greatly impacted by the brutal Rakata. The Sith themselves would suffer immensely, repelling an invasion by the Infinite Empire, arguably pushing them down the path of the dark side, which you can find out about in this video.